Good afternoon here on the East Coast, and welcome to our third panel of this ALD Connect newborn screening, non-cerebral ALD monitoring phase boot camp. So there's a whole bunch, again, there's a whole bunch of us that come from different diagnostic pathways, but are in the same collective boat together. I'm Kathleen O'Sullivan Fortin. I'm here to welcome you to from ALD Connect. And just a quick reminder that all the things that we discuss in these webinars, if you're watching it live, or in these videos that you're watching from home at another time, are not intended. They're just for informational purposes. Take some of it in, leave what doesn't suit you behind. This is not intended to be or take the place of medical or mental health care. Certainly go seek care if you need it, and work with your own clinician team, but we're just here to kind of share our stories and discuss. Also, we're so grateful for all the community support. We're so grateful for all of you willing to participate. And we're also grateful to our sponsors. And in particular, Bluebird Bio is sponsoring this whole boot camp. And we're so grateful because without them, we couldn't put on this kind of programming. So I just wanted to introduce everyone to our third panel. We're talking about the mental health implications to relationships, to marriages, to parenting, to siblings, everything that come up as part of the ALD experience. And so first I have Sarah Tarquini. She's a PhD pediatric psychologist at Boston Children's Hospital. We also are being joined by Meg Pimentel, who is an ALD patient who will share her story, and also the wonderful, amazing Bill and Kate Grohl, who are ALD superstar parents. And I always pump them up because they're horrified. They never know what I'm going to say. So I get to say it. But I'm so grateful for everyone for taking time and willing to be part of this panel. Sarah, take it away.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to participate today. I thought a nice place to start would really be to think about, anytime a child, really anyone at all, has any sort of medical complexity, we know we don't live in silos. We know we don't function in vacuums. And of course, this is true in this case as well. And so the image that comes to mind for me when I'm thinking even about where to start in terms of mental health is to think about, a perfectly clear lake and kind of one drop of water in that lake. And that drop being the center, wherever this ALD, diagnosis or screening is kind of popping up in any family structure, and thinking about the many, many ripples that kind of come from that one drop of water, and thinking about how far and wide kind of that drop reaches. It impacts not just the identified patient, as we kind of refer in the medical world, but it impacts everybody that's connected to that one individual. And it's not even that it's just, multiple layers of people as we get further and further and further from that drop of water. It also kind of drifts away, not just in terms of the number of people, but in time. It's not at just one time point. This medical complexity impacts people differently in the moment, and in the days and the weeks and the months and the years over time. And so this is a far-reaching, significant event for all patients and families. And I think it's really important to think about it in that context. That it's not just one person, it's all the people that love them and all the people that love them, and so on and so on and so on. And also to think about the fact that every person in that really complex unit is a different individual human person that comes to this with different personalities, different temperaments, different ages, developmental levels, different coping styles, different strengths, vulnerabilities, which is beautiful, and means that everyone's going to function and deal with this, reality in completely different ways. And that's really okay, but it can be really complicated. And today, I imagine, we'll have a chance to talk about how it can be for individual, people to, understand what this means for them, but also what it means in relationships, whether it's a relationship between a parent and a child, whether it's relationship between two caregivers, in a couple. That can get really complicated when everybody has different ways of processing information, coping with challenges, what feels helpful for them or not so helpful for them. These are really complicated dynamics. And again, I always come back to the fact that these things are not singular in time. People change, they develop. What worked for them last month doesn't work for them now. And certainly what worked for them years ago doesn't work for them in the future. So I think it can be really important when thinking about something as significant as an ALD screening diagnosis that, that comes along with really, challenging factors to deal with: uncertainty, how folks appreciate and understand uncertainty, and what that means for themselves, their own mental health, but also for the relationships and the mental health of those around them. So I hope, the takeaway that we can leave with today is the more that we are aware of these kind of complex dynamics, the more we're thinking about them, appreciating them, both for ourselves and for other people, the more we can be kind of open to and aware of the supports around us, and hopefully a willingness to seek those supports and utilize the supports that are available for us and for others. But maybe I'll take a moment and stop there. I know there's so much that we could be talking about, but maybe I will pass off to Meg for a few minutes to hear about her experience and maybe how some of these ideas and themes and considerations have kind of popped up in your experience, Meg.
Thank you, Sarah. And thank you to Kathleen and the ALD community for having me here today. Just to give you a little bit of my background and my story, about 35 years ago, ALD first came into our lives. Our cousin had been diagnosed, and his mom had called my mom and said, "Gee, I think your two boys who have Addison's should get tested." And they did. And lo and behold, they were positive for ALD. And we didn't know too much about it at the time, so it was scary. And this was in the age of not having the internet. So there was nothing we could Google. We didn't really have lots of resources. So we ended up taking a family trip down to Kennedy Krieger, and we met with Dr. Moser, and we all underwent testing at the time. And that testing revealed that not only were my two brothers positive for ALD, that my sister was as well. My other brother was told he didn't have it, and I was told at the time that I did not. And so I then went about my life, and we did the Lorenzo's oil, we did the no-fat diet, and things went along. Flash forward to when I met my husband and we began dating. He was somebody that we had grown up with and was aware of the medical issues that we had in our family, such as Addison's and ALD. He was very well aware. Well, I had reassured him, don't worry. I don't have it. We don't have to worry about that when we have kids. About a month before we got married, I was told that there was I could be in that group where there was a 20% false negative. And so I then contacted Florian Eichler, who treats my brothers, and I underwent the testing thinking, well, it will come back that I'm not. And we got the results after I was married. And it was devastating and shocking. And I didn't know what my options were. When my sister had gotten married, she was told at the time, this was early 1990s, we'll just have girls and it will be okay. And we know now that that's not the case. So I didn't know what my options were. And Florian suggested that I pursue IVF PGD. I had no idea what that was. I'm lucky enough to live in Boston, which, I am biased, I think is the medical center of the world. And I had a great team at Mass General Hospital that really walked me through that process and helped me understand what it was. And so I went through the first round, and I had a very difficult conversation with my husband, who is just an amazing guy. And he was all in. Whatever we needed to do, he was all in. So I went through the first round, which was unsuccessful. And then you start going through your mind, well, gee, should I include girls in this? Is that okay? Which was a difficult decision for me because my sister is severely affected. She's wheelchair bound. So that's our experience. And my brothers are, doing okay. I was lucky enough on the second round, I only had 2 eggs that were mature and both ALD free. And they were implanted, and 9 months later, well, actually they were born prematurely, but I was lucky enough to have Paul and Charlotte. And that means a great deal to me because I have a twin brother who has ALD, Matt. But knowing that there was still a 1% chance that the kids could have ALD, I then went the step further and had them DNA tested. And on their first birthday, I found out that they did not have ALD. So we were grateful that we were able to take that journey. With my husband and I think, we decided that we weren't going to pursue any more pregnancies, that, we had that successful one. And then I think for my husband, it's somewhat difficult because he's fearful for me and what my future holds, because he looks at my sister and the difficulties she's experienced. So that's something that's present in our marriage. We talk about it. And, I think in our family, we're very open about ALD and how it's affected all of us. And I think Sarah's point about the ripple effect is so well taken, because it's affected each of our lives in different ways. My niece was tested and she did not have ALD, but she's actively involved in the community. She works with Kathleen quite a bit, and I'm sure a lot of you know her, Emma. But she feels a real calling to help in this because she's seen how it's affected our family. So we're lucky we have each other as supports, but it's nice to be able to reach out to other folks in the community, not just in our family, but to share our experiences with other people. So I'm grateful for the ALD community. Thank you. And I'm going to let Bill and Kate now tell their story.
Okay, great. Thanks, Meg. Good to hear about your story again. Thanks for having us, for sure. Good to be back on the program, Kathleen. So our story has some definite similarities to Meg and her family. Kate's family, ALD goes back into the late 70s with the diagnosis of her, one of her older brothers and her uncle. And similar with Kennedy Krieger and that process and Lorenzo's oil. So somewhat parallel paths there, Meg, for a ways. Kate and I have, been married since 1997. So that's when I entered the picture officially. And we have 3 boys. Our oldest is 22, has the ALD diagnosis. Our youngest is 15, has the diagnosis as well. Our middle son does not. So when you talk about some of the relationships, I think when we talk about it and look back, it's been interesting and very varied. As kind of a young couple, early 20s, having a baby, we probably at that point should have talked more, but information was less available, even though it was in Kate's family. There wasn't as much research happening, or it wasn't as widely available. So in hindsight, we love our boys and we would have probably not done anything different, but we do kind of sometimes think to ourselves, like, did we talk about this thoroughly enough? But as it goes to relationships, I know it's been very different. Kate's family has the history. My family does not. And so approaching those conversations on both sides were difficult when you bring a child into the world with this diagnosis. Our boys were tested at birth with cord blood. So, it was a newborn experience for us. And then if you think about it, we had Connor, and then 2 years later, we elected to do it again and had Carson. So just the fact that we had children after the first one has brought up some difficult conversations with friends and family, or just how people would view us in general. Like, you did that once, why would you try again? Kind of conversations, which could be pretty difficult. and certainly stressful in how you handle those things. Very similar. After our second son was born, we were in California at the time and tried the PGD IVF as well. We were not the Easter Bunny and didn't have the greatest of egg production and an option. So I mean, it's just He
didn't prep me on that.
Well, I didn't prep it either. I kind of say what's on my mind. But I'm just saying, it wasn't, I hear that come up, and it wasn't the answer for us.
I mean, I was 28,
Yeah.
had gotten pregnant very easily with our first two boys that I had when I was 24 and 25. So we had no reason to think that it wouldn't work for us. And we did several cycles and it just did not.
Just didn't happen. So I know that's something that comes up in the community in terms of family planning, and it doesn't always work out like you planned, regardless of what your method is. So I mean, that was certainly stressful as well. And then we had our youngest son, Clancy. So there's 6 years in between the second and the third. And as I mentioned,
I mean 7, but who's counting?
Yeah. I'm getting older. I can't remember. And he was diagnosed with ALD as well. So both through the Lorenzo's Oil program, both have adrenal insufficiency. So, it really has been for us as a couple. Kathleen mentioned it in an earlier session that it has been kind of like a marathon. It's the way you feel about it, the way you think about it, your fears and concerns definitely change over the years, depending on which stage your boys are in, or even, your spouse. Kate obviously has ALD. I don't see a whole lot of symptoms, but, we know she does have it. Her mother is in her 70s with pretty severe symptoms at her age. So we see a broad spectrum of it, and it I guess in my experience, you do have to find your emotional support and how to relieve stress, because it can be a long haul. It's not all bad. There is some good there as well to grab a hold of in great moments. But I think, your expectations of what you might see from relationships with people might not be what you get. And I think you have to be flexible and understand that not everybody's able to give that emotional support you need, but you do have to find it somewhere.
And I think
find an outlet.
I think as a couple, it's kind of important as you're navigating to know maybe what roles you play, or where you feel comfortable with each other. So like in our situation, I'm pretty much in charge of all the medical care for our kids, all the doctor appointments and blood draws and, 504 plans and meeting with the schools and, meds, when you travel, and all that's kind of on me. And that's where I'm comfortable. I think that makes me feel in control of something that is not controllable. But that's where I feel a sense of comfort. And then Bill, I think his sense of comfort comes into researching everything that he can and really being on top of like everything that he can know. And God forbid anything goes wrong, who to turn to and who our community is, and what the next steps would be. So that's kind of in our relationship, how we've navigated. We've almost married 25 years, and we're probably pretty similar in our personalities. That in regards to that, the whole way through. I mean, different feelings might have changed as our boys were growing older, but how the kind of roles that we seem to play that have worked for us. I might have needed more support in the early years with making sure that Bill was there at the MRIs with me, like some things like that. But I think I wrote a list of comments that hopefully I'll be able to get to, but I think basically what we kind of wanted everybody to know is there's really no normal, I mean, in how we deal with this. It's kind of, we're all on a journey that we might not have picked, but hey, here we are. So how do we make the most of it? How do we make our children feel as normal as possible? How do we make our relationships feel as normal as possible? And how do we navigate our friendships and the people that we love that have let us down through this journey, the people whose comments have hurt us through this journey, and the people that have really stepped up and have been an amazing support system for us. So if anybody has any questions or anything for us in regards to any of that, we've kind of, our oldest is 22, so we've had the horrible comments and we've had the wonderful support system. So we feel like we are that we have a lot that we could share with people because we've had a lot of a big emotional journey ourselves throughout this.
And if I can tag on 30 seconds on the back of that one without taking up too much time, I think Kate's right. I think we always say to each other that we're very complementary in how we do things, and that leads to a little bit of a divide and conquer kind of attitude when it comes to anything that goes on, ALD related for sure. But we do talk about the fact that sometimes because you're taking on those roles, we still need to have a conversation, even if we don't want to have another ALD conversation. We still need to keep talking about it with each other, because I know, at least for me, as we've gone further through the process and trying to look at the future for our boys, I probably have a greater need, which may sound odd as the non-biologically impacted person in this role. And I think there are other dads, certainly like me, that you feel like you want to save the world, but you might be hurting inside, and you need some discussion. Or sometimes I say, well, I don't want to bring up this concern to you because I know you're dealing with issues with your mother, and this and that, and the boys' doctors, and we're it's swirling around us, but that's a mistake, quite honestly. You still need to find an outlet and relieve that stress to some degree. So I'm encouraging the guys that are in my camp to feel free to have those conversations.
That's wonderful, because women, we're talkers. We want to share our feelings. We want to express. I have this awesome necklace that I wear that another ALD mom sent me. And it says, the meaning of it is that we're in the same squad. And it's so thoughtful and so meaningful. And that's how we women kind of are with each other. The men, they put their strong fronts on, they do their part, but they don't always admit their own feelings. So we're hoping that part of this discussion too maybe opens up some men to understanding that every single one of their feelings are valid and validated as well. Back to you, Kathleen.
Well, I was going to say, I think that's so important to know that not only down gender lines, like some people need to talk through some things and some people don't want to talk through things. And I know that it can be challenging to reconcile those different coping mechanisms. Like, I obviously am the person in my family unit that had to throw themselves into ALD. I have to, and I'm very similar like Kate. Like I was measuring the oil, and I am the person who fills the grandpa pill case for every day. And, but I'm also the person who needs to talk about it. And so this lends to my, fits right in for me. But I'm wondering, I'm looking in the chat, and this great question has come up about guilt and resentment. I know that when my son was diagnosed about 10 years ago, obviously I was so confused and horrified and trying to wrap my mind around the disease, but I was horrified, absolutely horrified with guilt and racked with guilt that I had given it to him. Like I thought I had done everything right. I read every pregnancy magazine. I had done everything right. Like I just didn't know that I had ALD, and it certainly didn't help. At one point, I think a well-intentioned person in the medical field said, "Oh, if we'd known this, we would have told you not to have kids." And I was like, I'm not sure that's a helpful statement. I have 3. And I already feel terrible about it. Like, I just need you to, please, no one can make me feel worse than I feel about having it. And And I'm just wondering, like, I know I was worried that my in-laws and that my husband's family would resent me and that they would be like, I can't believe what you brought to our family. Like you brought, you know, and it couldn't have been, in my case, it couldn't have been more opposite. They are super supporters of ALD Connect. They are always, supportive of what, of my son John's health and how we're feeling. But I'm just wondering if anyone else is tangled with those
I
emotions.
mean, we definitely, I definitely, it's a burden to bear if you think that you're the one that passed this on to your kids. Bill likes to remind me that I could not have had the kids on my own. So that it's a burden. So it's a burden that he's willing to share with me. So over the years, you go through a lot of different feelings, but I feel really wonderful about my boys, and I feel really great about the lives that they're living, and the life that we've been able to give to them, and now the life that the 22-year-old is making for himself. And I mean, there's always something in life that could get you down if you want to get down, so we choose to look on the bright side always, and maybe feel like the closeness that having a rare disease perhaps has brought to our family, the conversations that we've been able to have because we've been forced to, but that have made us have a very open relationship and communication line with our kids as they've grown up, and to try to be able to understand what they feel and what their emotions are. So there's always, I would be lying if I didn't say there's always a little piece in the back of my head that feels bad about this. There'd be something wrong with me if I didn't have that piece, but we like to look at things, like put things in a box. So that is in a box and it's kind of wrapped up and it's in the back of my mind, and in the front of my mind are the wonderful futures and lives that we feel our boys are going to have. And in that sense, also, we still continue to do the research, and we continue to surround ourselves with positive people. Real briefly, when I found out I was pregnant with my second child, was my first kind of real eye opener. You'd think it would be the first one, but it kind of was the second one. I was in a play group with a bunch of young moms, and I found out that I was pregnant, and I was so excited to share the news with this group of women that were really close with me. And I told everybody I was pregnant, and the one mom that I thought I was a good friend with immediately said, "Why would you do that?" And it really was hard. It was like, I couldn't believe it. And I went home and I just cried and I cried and I cried. Like I couldn't believe that I had been judged like that. And that there was no joy or excitement. And I think that's kind of when we first started to say, hey, you can't have expectations for how other people are going to react to your situation. The only thing that you can control is how you handle it, and how you deal with that. So we've chosen to kind of, find your squad, keep them close, love them hard, because there are people that see not only your heartache, but your joy, and I guess that's my answer.
I approve.
Meg, I'm wondering, do you, I know that you had this successful IVF PGD, but did that come in? I mean, you were diagnosed so close to your wedding, and
it was difficult because it's interesting, building on what Bill and Kate said, I worried too what my in-laws would think. And my in-laws have known me since I was 5 and have known my whole family, but I still worried. And thankfully, I have wonderful in-laws who were tremendous about it. But, on a couple of different things. So I'm going to be a little bit all over the place, talking about the guilt aspect. My mom is 76. She still feels it. So no matter how old you get, no matter how old your kids get, no matter how well they do with ALD, even when I had to go through the IVF PGD, she felt terrible that she had passed it to me, and then I then had to go through that process to have children. In terms of, I've been judged a little bit for the IVF PGD. People automatically, it's weird, and I wouldn't have expected it. That as soon as people know that I have twins, and I'm a twin. Well, gee, I didn't think that twins happened. You must have done IVF. Oh, you did IVF. Oh, well. And it's so weird that there's still this stigma. And it kind of gets a little old trying to explain to people my journey and why I made the choice that I did. And I wouldn't have expected that. So the constant explaining about my choice and the way I went about it, and that everybody has to make different choices, what's right for them, it's been strange. So as open as we are about ALD within our family and within the community, it's been hard for us to be kind of open with the greater community about ALD, which is interesting for us. Because I think people still look at you, and there was always the fear of, well, are you going to be affected, especially knowing how it can present. So it's a weird stigma. And there's the guilt and all sorts of feelings that come with having a rare disease on so many different levels of, the guilt of passing it along, the guilt of, and I'm Catholic. And I think, people really were not happy with that choice that I made. You're throwing away your babies if you do IVF PGD, which, I mean, my God, that was tough for me because I don't believe that. So.
I'm feeling like it's so important to highlight some of the kernels that you all have been sharing, and thank you so much for doing so, because I think it can be so incredibly powerful for other folks hearing these stories. And some of the pieces that you're sharing, I've just heard so many times from so many other families. So just to validate and to kind of amplify what you're sharing. One thing, Kate, that you mentioned that I definitely want to highlight is this idea that feelings are feelings, and that's they're expected to be there. Like all people have all feelings, and it would be just to validate what you guys are sharing, that of course maybe feelings of guilt or resentment, like these things pop up all the time. And the way that you said, if you didn't feel it, it would be weird if you didn't feel it. And so I think it's so important to have feelings and to not judge ourselves for having them. And that can be really hard to do. Naturally, we're not built like that. And I think it can be so powerful for folks to be able to feel a feeling, even if it's not a pleasant one or a happy one, and let it be there and give yourself the time and the patience and the grace to work through it. I think can be really important. And I think another thing that you all were talking about today that's really important to highlight is that feelings don't come in really simple packages. Usually we feel multiple things at the same time, and sometimes we don't know what to make of that. And we talk about that as a dialectic, that a lot of times you can be excited and nervous at the same time. And I find that, and of course you can feel lots of things at the same time, but a lot of the complexities that we're talking about today come with lots of feelings all at once, and that's normal. And like we were saying, we don't need to pathologize that. It just is. When something is complex, it's going to come with really complex feelings. And I think that's really important to appreciate, because there's no way of getting through this without having complicated feelings. I think the other piece, I think Bill and Kate, that you were talking about, that's really important, and folks have kind of commented a little bit on, how to get through these tough patches. You mentioned that there are things that are within our control, and there are things that are not. And that just is what it is. That is the situation. And the more that we can identify and focus on the things that fall within our control, typically the more satisfied we are, the happier we are, because we can actually make change in those domains. You know, we can't control what other people say, we can't control how other people feel, but we can control how we navigate through them. So I think anytime folks are finding themselves in a place of conflict or complexity, that's always an amazing place to start. And it's natural to get pulled off that path sometimes, but the more we can find our ways back to that, typically the better off we are overall.
I totally agree with that. And I did see the one question is somebody saying, what's a good balance? And this is a tough one because, you know, when we were a new married couple, there was no internet. There was not even a laptop, I don't know. And
For sure, a desktop.
so, I mean, if you wanted to do something, you had to go to a library and, you know, maneuver the card catalog and, you know, I mean, so now everything is at your fingertips. And as wonderful as that can be, I also feel like that can be a really heavy burden on your brain, you know? So, my kids are 15 and 22 and knock on wood, doing well. I still find myself wake up in the middle of the night and want to check things out. I've found that I love the people that I love in the ALD support groups, but no offense to them, sometimes I need a break. Sometimes I have to put people on where I don't see things. Sometimes I just want to get on my Facebook and I want to see a picture of a college friend's baby, and I don't want to read about somebody's ALD journey. And that's totally fine and totally awesome, because there are other times that then I log back on when I'm ready, and then I feel like I can try my best to be a supportive person to them as well. So it's definitely a balance. But real quick, I just want to read something that I got from an ALD friend, a meme that my kids hate when I use the word meme, but I think it's a meme. And
Therein lies the problem. You don't know if it's a meme or not.
And it speaks volumes to me. It says, a special needs parent fell in a hole. The doctor says, can you keep a diary of your experience in the hole? The local authority says, sorry, we don't have enough money for a ladder. The charity says, here's a form, fill it out, get on a waiting list, and we'll try to get you the ladder. A family member says, what hole? And another special needs parent says, I'm here, I'm on my way down. I've been there before, I know how to get out, and I won't let you do it alone. And that just was really an aha moment for me, that even when you need breaks, other people in your rare disease community or true friends to you, they understand that. And nobody's judging you for that. And if you're around people that are judging you, think about surrounding yourself with some different people, because none of us need that, whether we're in a rare disease community or not.
And Kathleen, I don't know if I can take just a second. There is a question which sounds like it's from a set of grandparents with a child with a diagnosis, and you know, what can you do? And I think this one hits home a little bit with me, because I think you need some good listeners. So if you can be a good listener for the parents of that child, I think that's important. Because I have, you know, I'm still struggling to find some other good listeners within my own family. And I think you can have conversations with folks. They can know when you're at a doctor or doing an MRI and give you a thumbs up when it comes back good. But what I'm really missing, and I think other people are too, is just somebody to ask me how I'm doing or how I'm feeling. So I think if you can be a good listener for those parents, maybe not try to solve or fix everything, but just hear them out so that they can have some conversation. And I think you'll find that it's a bonding moment for you too, when you can do that with somebody. That
we've
they,
said
they
that
understand what you're going through, or at least are willing to hear the 30 minutes that you want to give to them if they're able. So if you're able to be a good listener and do that, that would be my
as
goal.
opposed to, we both have said over our journey, we've had people say, well, you could wake up tomorrow and get hit by a car. That's just what, I mean, you can't spend your life worrying, things happen to people. And it's like, does that make us feel more comforted?
Yeah.
Is that a proper reply? Most certainly not.
Yeah.
It's not. What's a proper reply is, how do you feel? And everything that you feel is valid and real. Even if I can't understand what you're going through, I believe that that's what you're going through, and tell me what I can do to help you. More of a listening, supportive ear is far better than somebody who wants to problem solve, because let's be real, they can't solve the problem. So why try?
And if I may, to piggyback off that, to the grandparents that same answer that we're working on, I would also say find your own support system, because I know it's so I know there's this how should I put this? You crave talking to people who understand ALD and are in the same boat, and at the same time, like I know when my son was diagnosed, I'm very close to my mother. We're sometimes two same ends of the battery. Sometimes it works out, but she called me once early in this game, and was crying to me about how sad she is, how terrible it is that John is sick, might get sick, and how terrible this is. And I found the strength to say, it is, and I need you to find friends to talk to about this, because I am lifting up myself, I'm lifting up my spouse, I'm lifting up my child and trying to help with that. And I don't have another hand to try and support you in how my son's diagnosis makes you feel. And so I was like, I love that, I'm sorry. I hate this for all of us, but I'm just not in the position to make this better, find a way to make this better for you, because you are my mommy. I need you to I need to call my mom and be like, oh, help. And if you're saying, help back, then I feel lost. So, and she was totally understanding and was like, of course, I just didn't know if I was allowed to tell my friends. I was like, we didn't pick this up from doing some shady business. This is just an inborn genetic, disorder. There should be no shame involved in this for any of us. This is who we are. It's also why we're spectacular and good looking and witty, and all the things that I'm sure someday the doctors will find are on that same stretch of X chromosome as our ABCD1. But, I think for those grandparents to realize that the best way they can help their child and their grandchild is to build their own support system, so that they can make sure that it's kind of a one-way support for a while until everyone's got their feet on the ground. I don't know if that's
Kathleen, I'm so glad you brought that up, and it reminded me, I don't know if folks have heard about ring support theory, this idea that, again, if we get to the concentric circles again, the idea of the ring theory is that we start at the middle with the one individual who's affected and work our way out. And the idea is you can only support in and you can only dump out. Okay, so the people on the inside of the circle can go to anyone, further out you go, and you get to decide and you get to control that. And you should be able to kind of go to any of those folks for support. But the folks on the outside should really try to be mindful. And sometimes they need education about this, and they need the folks on the inside to help them understand and appreciate. Sounds like Kathleen, you did a really nice job of that. But they have to know, what works for you and what doesn't. And sometimes a little nudge can be helpful, that yes, I understand your experience, and if you could dump out, that would be great. And the way you can help me is by listening. And Bill, to your point too, sometimes people really need help around what listening actually is, and what validation actually is, unless they're a trained mental health professional. listening is really hard to do, and validating is really hard to do, especially when people themselves are emotionally connected to the situation. So that is a really common challenge that folks run into. But I love this idea of support goes in and dumping goes out.
I'm just checking here in the chat, and there's a question: thoughts on sharing information with friends, family, neighbors, schools, strangers, especially because the kids are involved. I know there was a comment in the chat in a previous discussion where I know some people are tremendous oversharers. I'll let everyone guess where I fall on this spectrum. And they just share. That's great. Some people are not interested in sharing, or it's traumatizing to have to share it. I think there's also an issue in our community with people feel like they should, if they're not sharing, they should be. That, like, there's a lot of pressure, I think, that sometimes people will tell me they feel like they should be an advocate. They feel like they should have taken this and transferred it up and be out there sharing, doing, going. And, Sarah, I'm wondering if you can talk about, like, finding the right kind of pathway for yourself at what time. Because I don't think the day you get your diagnosis, you shoot out the clinic door and start,
Yes, this can be incredibly complicated for folks. And I think to the point that you just made, I think just naturally and organically, this is very individualized. Every question actually that I'm seeing kind of popping up in the thread, I really think part of maybe what could be liberating for folks to realize is that there is no one right way to do any of this. And really it comes down to being really mindful about what is right for you in that situation and in that time. And if you find yourself anytime, when kind of a red flag, a trigger should be anytime we hear the word should getting like put on us, to your point, oh, you should have been talking, or you should have kept that to yourself. It's really important to take a pause and to realize that that should is completely unfair. And it is coming from a place of judgment from one point or another. And it really is incredibly individualized and person specific and family specific around how you decide how you would like to, or if it would be beneficial for you to engage or share. Because as you're saying, it's not just impacting just one person, it might impact the family in some way. And that's really up to you. And when you're feeling comfortable and when you feel like it would be helpful. So I appreciate that that's not, a direct answer, because there is not one direct answer of, at week 5, you share information with the school, or at month 3, you tell the extended family. There's just so many factors that come into play around what ultimately would be best for your family.
Oh, yeah, we have our mute, aren't we? Muted?
No, you can go right ahead.
Okay. So I thought I was muted. I also think that it's important to give ourselves grace as parents, that we might not be ready to go do a massive fundraiser or spread the word to the world. And that's okay. Like, you don't have to feel less than if you're not willing or ready to do that. And if you're never willing or ready to do that, that's okay also. And I also think from a parent's point of view, how we've advocated and what we've shared or overshared or undershared has changed throughout the years, according to our boys and according to what they wanted people to know and what they felt comfortable with. So I think, just like Sarah said, it's definitely not a one size fits all answer. And I think the answer continues to change as your kids get older and your journey could change. I also think that this is a really important thing that I've been thinking about, Kathleen. I think we should have a cheat sheet for parents to navigate how they actually explain what ALD is. because I bump into a lot of parents that say, well, I would really like to tell people, but I don't know how. And I feel so embarrassed and I feel so stupid. And this is something that is in my family, and I should know how to do it. And I'm nervous. I'm nervous to say what it is. I'm nervous to describe it. I'm nervous for them to ask me any questions about it, that then I'll feel dumb that I can't answer it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, if there's people that think like that, totally validated, because I hear it a lot. I felt it a lot, like I can talk up a blue streak. I'm a communications major for a reason. A science major, I was not. So to get into the intricacies of this rare disease that nobody knows about, it's hard. And that, I think, it weighs on the minds of a lot of people. So I think maybe if we as ALD Connect could help them come up with, hey, this is a great analogy to explain this, or hey, this is maybe not the medical, complete medical way to say it best, but this is the best way on your day-to-day basis to give people an idea. I think that would be maybe helpful, and maybe would make people feel a little bit more in control of spreading the understanding.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, because for all the wonders and gifts that I'm convinced come on our Crazy X, it does not come with a medical degree. It does not come with, like super, the ability to define something that our own experts struggle to define at times. We only have a couple minutes left. I was wondering if people might be willing to share, how are some of the ways that you have personally softened the burden of ALD in your family, in your own life, coping mechanisms? Like, I know I do a lot of yoga because I try and stay active, not only because I know it might be good for avoiding future symptoms, but also because I find that there's like a real endorphin rush and release. And also on the flip side of that coin is, after don't try to find me tomorrow. Every day after I talk about ALD a lot, I give myself permission to do a whole lot of nothing. And I might be, day after tomorrow, I will be watching Netflix and playing with my brand new kitten or something, but I will not be. I find that there's a need to kind of give yourself a break from ALD sometimes. I'm wondering if anyone else has any other suggestions for who might be looking.
I mean,
I would just chime in quickly, with my husband and I think, it's important for me as the ALD patient to validate the non-ALD spouse in their fears, in their concerns, for me, for the other folks in my family, and to not just push him aside, but to really let him in, let him express what his concerns are, his fears, and because he's part of this too. Bill had touched on this, in his role, and I think it's really important, to validate that just in that couple relationship too, because I think I know sometimes I've had a tendency to say, oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. That's not helpful to him. And I think it makes him feel more scared. And so I think communication is just really important. To go back to the theme of listening, I think that's really important.
Yeah, I guess for me, I think of, I do think you have to make a conscious effort to check your emotional inventory. I mean, if I'm hungry, I feel it. If I'm thirsty, I feel it, those types of things. And, go get a drink of water, but I don't necessarily, I feel like I need to consciously check in on myself with where am I emotionally, and can I move on with more of this dialogue or something related to ALD, or do I just need to drop it? Whether that's a conversation with one of the kids or Kate or whoever, but just trying to be more conscious of where I am on that spectrum for me of, am I just burnt to a crisp or am I good, but and not all of the ALD activity has to be bad. I mean, I find it a little bit therapeutic when I read an article about some new promising, study that's underway. And to me, that's like a hopeful moment. So that's not stressful for me. That's kind of a good thing for me.
She says
But-
wrap up in 60 seconds.
Okay.
So I just super fast, and I can't believe I'm gonna put this out there because we are, this is being recorded, but I'm a total reality show junkie. And it's my release. And I say to, he's like, why do you watch Temptation Island, Kate? And I'm like, I watch these shows and it's just so fun to not worry at all about me and my life and my problems and just like tune in on other people's drama. I absolutely love it. And it's my most favorite way to, it's therapy. You do yoga, you're probably in better shape than me. I watch reality TV and eat some chips, I guess.
Sarah, do you have any last words of wisdom for us?
Last word, I would just say that, if folks are trying these kinds of things, you've tried yoga, you've tried TV, you've tried talking to your partner, and these things are not quite enough, I would just encourage folks to reach out to the medical providers, whether they're your ALD team, whether it's your PCP, whether it's someone in your community, that might be able to give you some referrals to mental health professionals that would really be able to provide you with the support that you would need. It might just be for a short time, it might be for a long time, it might be for you, it might be for your family, but support is out there. And if these strategies aren't working, I would highly recommend looking into that kind of support. It can be incredibly beneficial and can really be helpful when you're tackling things that are this deep and stressful and significant.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Sarah, Meg, Bill, Kate, thank you. Thank you for watching, everyone. I'm going to have to shut this down and get up on the next one, but thank you so much. And if you have questions, concerns, send it to ALD Connect and we can find a way to get those questions answered from the panel.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.